Hey guys, what is up and welcome back to the channel. So in this video we are going to be taking a first look at Super Smash Bros. Ultimate booting on day one of release in Ryujinx, this Nintendo Switch emulator. So I know that I myself haven't been covering Ryujinx for quite a long time on the channel now, and I'll go over exactly why that is a little bit later on in the video, but for now let's concentrate on exactly what stage of bootability and playability Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is in this Switch emulator exactly at this point in time. So there you go. I know it looks very bad and very poorly rendered, but this is the initial introduction cutscene for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate running using this Switch emulator. Now I know it looks very buggy and it looks very laggy, and even though the video is pretty much as bad as you're seeing it on screen right now, the audio is actually quite decent. The main reason why we're getting such bad audio, at least at this point in time, is because we are most likely going through some kind of shader compilation, and this implementation of being able to watch these kind of videos is very new in this Switch emulator. So around now and around 50 or 60 seconds into booting of the game and actually getting your first images is around the point in time that the audio and video kind of becomes a little bit more stable. So I'm just going to give you a quick snippet of what the in-game audio sounds like. And there we go, not too bad at all, especially so when you consider that this game was only just released today. So let's now just skip forward in time to when we can actually get to the next stage of this game's bootability, getting it to the in-game menus. So here you can see after the introduction cutscene, be it if you just leave it play or if you just skip it by pressing the plus button on your controller, and there should actually be fonts rendered here, but due to the fact that Ryujinx does not have a full implementation of fonts being rendered, they are currently not rendered at this point in time, unfortunately. So I do apologize about any flickering you're going to see in this video. It's unfortunately completely unstoppable at this point in time because it's just, as I said, this is the first day that this emulator has booted, but here you can see that we are able to navigate through these menus, and performance-wise we're getting around 20 to 30 frames per second depending on which menus we go into. So with full and honest disclosure, this is pretty much as good as it gets for now. 90% of these menus, if we try to actually progress in here, you're going to see that we're going to get, well, it's not too bad this time, but you see that the background image is flickering very extensively, and in pretty much most of these areas, if I select any of these options, it's just going to crash the emulator or soft lock the game. So if I come back here, we can actually select pretty much all of these menus. You're going to see we're going to be able to, you see, I might have frozen now. Have I frozen? No, it's not actually too bad, but you're going to see that it's pretty bad, and a lot of stuff is flickering and flashing, and the build itself that we are using is pretty much just an experimental PR, and I'm not even sure how hacky it is or if it's very hacky, but it's just it's still pretty cool that we are actually able to boot this game at all. So you can see that these menus do indeed work, but as I said previously, we do not have any kind of working fonts in this emulator at this point in time, and as we've seen in pretty much all the previous menus, we just get this absolutely incessant flickering in pretty much all of them. So let's just exit back out to our main menu and hope the emulator isn't going to crash. As I've already said, this is a super work in progress build of this emulator, and it is very prone to crashing, so it could literally crash at any second and we'll just completely lose all video signal. So pretty much all of these items in the right hand menu do actually work, but as I've already said, pretty much every, I guess you'd call it like a sub menu or something. So if you select any one of these tiles and then select whatever comes after what appears in these tiles, the emulator is just going to completely crash and freeze, and it's not going to do anything else. So it is still pretty cool that these menus are even showing at all, and this isn't me moving my controller very fast, it's completely freaking out all on its own right here. And as you're going to see when I try to actually load into a game, we get fairly crazy flickering again. Once again, I apologize for that. But when I actually try to select to go into character select, or if I select any of these options right here, it's just going to completely crash the emulator. So there we have it. I tried to select this mode and it just completely froze and soft locked the emulator. So at least we're not getting any more flickering anymore, but this is pretty much the stage that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is, at least on a Ryujinx emulator at this point in time. So I'm not just going to test Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, because if I do that and don't test other games, you guys are probably just going to ask me in the comments below anyway. And to be honest, I kind of just want to clarify exactly why I semi-stopped or put a hiatus on my testing of games on this emulator. So here we are in the title menu of Super Mario Odyssey running in Ryujinx. Now this is not the same build that I was using for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. That build is a special one that is pretty much only put together just to run that game, pretty much, as I said, as a work in progress, just to show that it is potentially bootable and maybe at some point in future playable on this emulator. So probably one of the most noticeable things is the fact that graphics have, yes, improved a lot since I last took a look at this game, at least in this title menu section. And while, yes, we don't have fonts in this build, there is in fact a build very similar to what Yuzu emulator has that can actually enable the showing and rendering of these fonts. But for this video at least, I just wanted to show you exactly what you can expect to see if you wanted to run any of your games on the Master, which is basically the most stable release version of this emulator at this point in time. So the loading screen you're seeing right here is exactly what you can expect, and it actually does take this long. It took me probably over 45 seconds just to get through that loading screen, and to actually boot the game itself probably took me about 6 minutes before I got to the actual title screen menu of the game. Now this time that it takes to boot games and get through loading screens and actually try to test your games, in combination with something you're going to see as soon as we get in game, is pretty much the exact reason why I stopped doing 90% of my testing for Ryujinx and why I kind of stopped making videos on this emulator itself. In between all of that black screen that you just saw in the previous area and actually getting into game, it took me another 8 minutes to get through that section and actually get loaded into game, where there was a point that I could test how the game's functionality is working. And as you can see right here, it is now running at 0.03 frames per second, which is pretty much a regression on the last time I tested this game on this emulator. Now, I know you can say that I'm just bitching or I'm complaining for something that shouldn't actually be complained about, and you're absolutely right. You're 100% correct. The developers of this emulator are at the moment not concentrating at all really on the bootability and playability of games. It's not that I've completely ignored Ryujinx or stopped paying attention to its development, and by looking at its development channels over in its Discord, and I'll link the Discord down below and you can do exactly the same, its developers are currently working on reverse engineering the kernel and getting all of the backend stuff ready, and they are also trying to get like OS functions and trying to make it absolutely perfectly as accurate as they can to how everything works on the Switch itself. So for many of you who would have been part of my YouTube community or part of my Discord, you will hopefully already be aware of the fact that this channel was made so that I could, for one, keep people up to date on all of the latest going-ons of all of my favorite and hopefully all of your favorite emulators, and also so that I could make some cool guides that will show you exactly how to use all of these emulators to the best of their possible potential. Now, at this point in time, at least in my opinion, for complex 3D games, at least like Super Mario Odyssey, this emulator is currently just not there yet. But I can definitely 100% see this emulator becoming absolutely huge in the future, especially so when they completely reverse engineer all of these different functions and get all of the backend stuff, like I mentioned earlier in the video, perfectly working. Now, that's not to say that this is a bad emulator. Tons and tons of games run absolutely awesomely, like you can see right here in Sonic Mania. This is one game which obviously is a more simple 2D game, but it runs absolutely perfectly on this emulator at this point in time. Many other games just like this one are in pretty much a perfect state and are very playable just like this on this emulator. A very good example and a very good comparison to another Switch emulator I already cover on this channel, Yuzu, would be right here in Super Meat Boy. Now for anybody who has tried out Super Meat Boy on Yuzu emulator, you would be aware of the fact that there is absolutely massive texture corruption, and due to that texture corruption, that game is completely unplayable on that emulator, at least at this point in time. Well, right here you can see in Ryujinx, this game is fully playable both at full performance and it is graphically basically perfect. So what I hope you guys have taken from this video is the fact that while yes, I may not cover Ryujinx as much as I previously did on the channel, I am definitely still keeping my eye on its development, and if we see any breakthroughs just like the one we have seen in this one with Super Smash Ultimate booting for the very first time on this emulator, I will always make sure to let you guys know as soon as possible. So as I always do guys, I will include the Patreon link to the funding page for this emulator in the event that you guys want to show your love or show your support for this Switch emulator's development. Now, as most of you guys also know, 90% of the content on my channel is user generated, basically meaning that it is all stuff that you guys have personally requested. I then in turn make those videos and make sure that all of you guys are as up to date as possible on all of the latest going-ons in all of these emulators. With that said guys, if you do want me to test any specific game on this emulator and let you know how it runs, you can as always just let me know down below in a comment, or you can join my Discord server and ask me over there. So once again guys, cheers for checking out this video. Remember to like it if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, and as always, subscribe to the channel if you want to see all future videos from me.